Ellis Roberts is a Mount Pleasant resident, a father, a husband, and an attorney who now wants to become the next state representative for House District 110. I speak exclusively with him one-on-one for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Ellis Roberts, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you for having me, Quintin. This is a huge honor for me to be on this program. I have watched countless of interviews over the years, and so I'm excited to be a part of it. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm happy to provide a public service to this great community. Speaking of which, I know that you want to provide a great public service to this community because you are a father, a husband, a Mount Pleasant resident, and an attorney. And now you are a Democratic candidate for the South Carolina House District 110 area. But let me go right to it because it was just redistricted a couple of months ago. The new House District includes most of Mount Pleasant, south of 526 between Hog Creek and Coleman Boulevard, of course, portions of the Old Village, which I love, south of Simmons Street, also included in that particular district. And you also have portions of St. Andrews 4, which includes parts of South Windermere, Marlboro Point, and the Crescent, which is also included in the district. You also have, I believe, new areas of James Island, which includes everything north of Foley Road to the Country Club to Harbor View Road, and both sides of Harbor View Road from Foley to Fort Johnson Road as well. Yeah. Woo. Okay.
It is a lot, and that also included is everything downtown Charleston from Calhoun Street all the way to the Battery. It is. I try to describe it to folks because I'm talking about it a lot. It was affected by the redraw, but I basically describe it as a big horseshoe that goes around the harbor because, like you mentioned, we are in Old Village across 17 and Hobcon Ion, and we go all the way downtown West Ashley, and then of course all the way down Harbor View and James Island. So it's a great district, but it's a large one, and it carries a lot of different areas.
Okay, let me jump right into it. So what are the concerns you're hearing right now from all of these people in this particular district now that it has been redistricted?
Yeah, you would think, okay, everybody has obviously some differences when we look at Mount Pleasant, downtown, and James Island. But then again, we also have a lot of similar issues. Every issue is being affected by flooding. Every issue would like to see improvement in our public education. Every issue has obviously these unbelievable natural resources that we have all grown to love and want to protect. And so these are things that across the board have affected all three, and when including a little bit of West Ashley, all four of these areas. And so, I've been out there talking with folks about this. Obviously, some of these areas do have their independent concerns, but I still think from a representative level on the state government, we can combine all these interests and be able to represent the district as a whole effectively.
So let me ask you this, Mr. Ellis. How do you make the District 110 competitive today so that South Carolina can actually be better tomorrow?
Yeah, would you say that first part I missed?
Okay, so let me ask you this, Mr. Ellis. How do you make District 110 competitive today so that you can make South Carolina better tomorrow?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, this is a very moderate district. We've seen this, the numbers say that this district has voted for Democratic candidates on the national and statewide level. In recent elections, it's had a moderate Republican representative for the last 6 years. And I have always called myself a moderate Democrat. The government isn't necessarily responsible for every issue, and I don't approve just throwing money at problems is automatically going to make solutions. But when we start talking about what this district needs, and just as important, what the state of South Carolina needs, we're talking about issues like currently, for instance, women's rights are being questioned. Our public education is suffering. We're 44th in the country in public education. We have to improve that. I think that our natural resources and our environment, the impact that we're having when it comes to whether it's flooding, beach erosion or anything else that what we've seen down here, especially as you know, we're hit with another hurricane. And so these issues are important when we want to improve not just our community, not just this district, but improve the state of South Carolina. If we want to make an investment and get a positive return on that investment, it's going to start with public education and improving it. It's going to start with protecting our natural resources. So we're not giving up our land, which is the second you give it up, it's gone. And, we need to think about not only what does this area look like today, but what is it going to look like in the future? And so that's why I think those two issues particularly are very important for our district and our state.
I'm going to get back to that in just a second, but and this might be a redundant question, Mr. Ellis, but what three things right now can make your district more competitive?
I think that when we look at, for instance, Quintin, the amount of the taxes this district represents, right? And this district sending that to Columbia. And we also look at the growth that we've all experienced over the last 10, 15, 20 years. I went to the College of Charleston in the 90s, and I can tell you, I love Charleston and I love this area, but at one point we were this great city of church steeples, and you cross the bridge and look downtown now, and the skyline is cranes or monstrosity buildings that have been erected in the last 10 years. And growth can be a good thing, but when we're not prepared for it, or when the state's not allocating infrastructure dollars to help, then it can easily be a bad thing. And what we're experiencing now, we're congested with traffic, we're at standstills every day, and we're being squeezed. And what we need to have in place is a plan moving forward on how to prepare for this growth, how to adapt to it, so we don't lose our quality of life here in the Low Country, which we all appreciate.
And I have a couple of questions, probably one redundant, but how does District 110 Ellis grow with smart growth?
That's a great question, because what we need to have, instead of just, hey, if you have the money, go ahead and build, what we need to have are plans and incentives put in place that we don't have right now, that encourages with any construction project, especially massive construction projects, that it requires and incentivizes affordable housing being built, right? Because we don't have enough of that here in the Low Country. Our housing costs are so much higher than, say, the median income that we see in the Low Country. And so we need to provide, whether it's tax incentives or vouchers, and the state can be more involved in this. I mean, we can pass laws that actually have to do with what this is going to, what type of construction projects need to incorporate affordable housing in it. And so, there's no easy answer to this, Quintin. It's tough. I mean, we have a road ahead of us, but the problem is when we're not paying attention to it, or we're not focused on this, it can easily get out of control. And that's what we've seen, in my opinion, in these last 10 years, especially, is this kind of out of control growth and out of control overdevelopment that we either haven't been prepared for or we're not preparing for it. And I think the state, although this is predominantly a local issue when it comes to zoning laws, the state can certainly help. And I don't believe that the federal government or the state government, for instance, has all these answers. But I do believe that it's the role of the state government to work with our local governments to allocate proper funding, so our local governments have the tools that they need to be able to assess what the growth is like in their own communities and how to prepare for it.
So what is the current growth rate for District 110?
Well, what we've seen in the last 10 years, I mean, we're talking about 35 people on average a day move to the Low Country.
Sure.
That's an astounding number. And we are seeing a constant growth here in these last 10 years, particularly. One that I don't think we were quite prepared for. Jobs, things like companies like Boeing and Volvo, Mercedes coming to this area. This is a good thing. It's not bad to inject economic surplus into an area and be able to pay people properly. But what we have to do is be cognizant of that. We obviously, Charleston and Mount Pleasant and James Island, these are all areas that are restricted by water. There's only so much we can go in one direction. And so we need to be cognizant of this, and how do we prepare from an infrastructure standpoint, from an education standpoint, how do we prepare to allow growth without everybody being congested and squeezed on a daily basis? When we start talking about that, when we start experiencing that, we start losing quality of life. And, these are things that have attracted these companies to the Low Country. These are things that have attracted tourism. These are things that have attracted people to move in and reside here. And so to give it away is counterintuitive to what our goals and our projects should be focused on.
So what do you think the growth rate was 2 years ago versus right now?
We've been at a steady stream. I mean, we've seen some fluctuation with regards to the average folks, the average number of folks that have been moving here. But that 35 number, it was a little bit increased 2 years ago. Just because it may be slightly lower now does not mean anything when we're looking at it as a whole. That's a huge number to think about. When that many people are moving to one area of a state, we don't see that kind of growth anywhere else across the state of South Carolina. And, other than a handful of cities like Raleigh, North Carolina, Nashville, Tennessee, these are kind of anomalies of what we've seen with particularly those three areas. As far as their growth and their of what they've experienced in the last, 10, 15 years.
And I visited Nashville for the first time in July for work and loved it. So I'm actually going back in December. So I'm excited about that. Great city. But let me ask you this. Okay, I know it's really a local issue when it comes to obviously drainage and flooding. So let me ask you this. How have the city of Charleston and the town of Mount Pleasant and the town of James Island actually developed and adopted and actually implemented a drainage master plan in coordination with these adjacent jurisdictions?
Yeah, so that is important, right, to do. And I'd love to help, allow this master plan to go forward. I think it's important when we're talking about Mount Pleasant, Charleston, and James Island in these contexts. I also know that the folks on James Island are very independent and have their own council. They've voted, as we've seen, they voted for that years ago. And Mount Pleasant has a fully qualified council as well, and mayor who I've met with. To address their own issues. It's hard because the state government oftentimes really wants to get involved and kind of govern from Columbia. And I disagree with that notion. And that's why I believe I'm firmly a moderate Democrat as I've always been. It's not the role of the state to do that. What the role is of the state is to say, listen, this area needs help. This area is providing X number of tax dollars. This area has X number of residents. And these are issues that are pressing for this area when it comes to flooding particularly. Flooding has such a greater impact than sitting in traffic on the way to or from work each day and the deterioration it does on cars. It also deteriorates the home value of every one of us. Because when we are in these flooding zones, immediately that is going to deduce the average cost of the home. That's going to deduce the selling price. That's going to deduce potential loans to get from a bank if somebody needs it. And yet, not only does it deduce it from that side, but the homeowner is constantly paying for issues that they are suffering from flooding. And this is a very dangerous thing. This allows for obviously salt water to come onto our land. And so it can do nothing but harm. And so we've got to get a hold of this if we want to be serious about, improving this area, this quality of life. We experience flooding on a monthly basis. It's not when a hurricane comes in. And God forbid one does, and it's a large tide, and we get hit at the wrong time. This is going to be catastrophic. And I'm not trying to say all this that we should all be running scared. It's just a problem that we need to address, and that state should be allocating proper funding to help the local governments address this problem. It really should be one of the top priorities when we talk about what our local governments are doing to protect the Low Country for the future.
So what is the average home value right now in District 110?
Yeah, it's about $462,000, which is a lot of money. I think that may be a countywide cost. 462. We're looking at, I think, a median income. The district is going to be higher than the county. I believe the county is going to be somewhere around 50, whereas the District 110, which is really that harbor pocket, is going to be closer to 70, 75 when we talk about, especially with joint income. Still, that cost of house being, and that's just a median at 462,000. 462,000 is a lot of money. And so when you think that that is just the one that's in the middle, that is very high for cost of living for folks to be working and living here in the Low Country, here in that district particularly, and to be able to work in it and also live in it. We see that constantly. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to go out to 17, coming in from Mount Pleasant, coming in from James Island, from Foley, look at I-26 in the morning. And then look at the peninsula. It is a massive amount of cars that are coming into our area to downtown or to the surrounding areas to work. And then they leave at the end of the day. We have got to have affordable housing in place that allows folks to be able to work and live in their own communities.
Mr. Ellis, let me ask you this. With obviously the prices of homes and obviously the prices of rent going up significantly, where do these people work?
Well, we have the Medical University of South Carolina is the largest employer in our area. College of Charleston is not too far behind. Obviously, the Citadel is out there. When we look at our major institutions, those are huge economic engines as well for our area. Obviously, we have large private companies as well that are mostly outside of the area of District 110, but we still have them in our Low Country area. Goes without saying that Bowen's a major employer as well. But we see it in, from 526 in Mount Pleasant, really a large part of this district of 110. 526 to the foot of the bridge has a lot of employment in Mount Pleasant. You see a lot of employment downtown from Calhoun down to the Battery that's part of this district, as well as going into West Ashley and parts of James Island.
So let me ask you this. How many workforce housing does this particular district actually need?
How many
workforce housing?
Workforce housing. Well, that's when we look at, say, what the average rent is or what the average mortgage is, and then you compare that with the median income. It's tough to put an exact number on it, but we calculate those numbers and say, okay, this is how many folks, for instance, are employed in this whole area. These are how many folks that live here in this area. And so you see this massive amount of folks who obviously don't live here that work here. And then when you compare that with the average salary, the average home cost, and understand that comparison would make it not affordable, right? So it's hard to pinpoint an exact number of this is exactly how much housing we're going to need to satisfy the problem. I will say this:
Yes,
when
sir.
we talk about 35 people moving here a day, I don't think that there's going to be an exact number that we reach that says, "Okay, we've done our job. That's perfect." And I'm not thinking either that the state government, by any means, is going to come in and write a check and everything's going to go back to being great and fine and resolve all the problems. That's not what this is about. What this is about is when we see this new construction that we have, not just on the peninsula, not just in District 110 in Mount Pleasant and West Ashley, James Island, but in our low country area. What we have to do, because we're pushing folks out and we're pushing people continually beyond that horseshoe of the harbor, and because it's becoming unattainable, what we have to do is stop doing that. And that is going to require us to put incentives in place, to put vouchers in place, that when these construction companies are building, when the investors are investing, it is a requirement and an incentive that they factor in housing that is going to be affordable for folks that meet that median income.
Yes, sir. Okay. So how many homes have been built at a fairly consistent rate in your district?
We have seen, compared to the rest of the county and low country, it's a much smaller number because of what we have seen lately with the homes here. We have seen a huge uptake of renovation, not much land in District 110. And what is there has been kind of eaten up lately by large projects. We can see it. You know, some of these projects look like Gotham City out of a Tim Burton movie. It doesn't quite fit with this low country in this area, but we haven't seen a large increase in the building of homes that weren't already on lots that existed with houses previously. And like I said, it's more what we've seen in this area are renovations, which is another issue of itself. But we've seen a lot more renovations, especially in these last 4 years since 2018.
Okay. Okay. Well, let me ask you this. What infrastructure projects are currently going on in your district right now?
You know, I think we have two major projects, and one of them is somewhat right outside the district. We have a 526 interchange at Long Point. Right. We obviously have, you know, the bike trail, the bike pathway for Charleston, which is very important. You know, and that's not going to solve all of our transportation problems, and it's not technically supposed to either. It's supposed to relieve transportation issues, but you know, this is also important this goes back to quality of life. You know, we should be able to get out and enjoy the areas of which we live. Our children, our families should be able to ride bikes safely. You know, as you're right down the road from where I am in downtown, and you know, it's a little dangerous, especially during rush hour times. And so those are the two main projects, Quentin, that are going on right now. That from the DOT.
Okay, Mr. Ellis, let me ask you this, and I just thought about this too. But what's more important right now for your district? Is it building new homes in commercial space, or rehabbing, expanding, and better utilizing the existing homes?
Well, we've got to better utilize existing homes, and we've got to better utilize existing space. So I don't think the answer is let's just build. We're doing that right now. We see it. That goes to the skyline of Crane's comment right earlier. It's happening. And what I'd like to see is more concentration in trying to rehab what we have, trying to make use of what is out there in existence. You know, we still have condemned houses and dilapidated houses right here on the peninsula and in other areas too. And I'd like for those to be fixed and refurbished to allow folks to come in and live in this existing space that's already been allocated for housing.
And I can count on my hands how many of those are in the district right now. So tell me exactly where else do you see the amount of dilapidated homes that is in your district?
Well, you do see some in certain parts of James Island. There's not too many in my district in Mount Pleasant area, but for the most part, it's down on the neck, of the Charleston Peninsula, which technically isn't my district, but a lot of our problems or a lot of the issues that need to be addressed in 110 are just not about 110. It's about how do we improve our entire area? And just because one street goes down a district, some of these redrawings are quite strange and quite odd. There's no excuse for a representative to look at that and say, well, sorry, that's not part of the district, when it's literally right across the street from their district. So I see that problem a lot more along the neck and along the peninsula. Obviously, North Charleston, not as familiar with North Charleston as I am with District 110, but I've worked with folks like Marvin Pendarvis and J.A. Moore, who are both friends of mine, and some other folks about what those districts need. Marvin Pendarvis, for example, has been working hard in the legislature to address this affordable housing issue. And so I hope in November, to win on November 8th and to be able to work with folks like Marvin and others on addressing this problem.
Should affordable housing be put on the ballot?
Well, it depends on how it's going to be put on the ballot. I mean, the question is so complicated and difficult. So not that voters can't handle it. We've seen time and time again that voters understand how to process complicated issues and difficult questions on a ballot and be able to answer them effectively and efficiently. However, there is no one fell swoop with affordable housing. We can't pose a question that says, okay, should we fix affordable housing or should we address affordable housing? I mean, that question is an automatic yes. And so when it comes down to it, is, well, what do specific areas need to address the affordable housing? What are certain types of incentives and that could be project based for each construction project, for each investor with regards to what they are building and how that should incorporate affordable housing into that project that they are going forward with. And so that's a more complicated, almost case-by-case basis that we can't afford to put on a ballot every 2 or 4 years and kind of let that be a question. Now, if there was a specific tax that we would propose, which I do not propose for any increases of taxes, but if there were to be, then I would recommend that would be a ballot issue if the voters were going to somehow be taxed on affordable housing or have to give up a cent tax or whatever it may be to put forward on affordable housing, then I would absolutely agree that the voters should decide that.
What does your district actually need right now? Is it attainable housing? Is it affordable housing? Or is it workforce housing?
I think the district needs, out of those, both attainable and affordable. We still have and sometimes you could argue both, right? That you could potentially have a crossover in both of those categories. We still have a level of poverty in our area that we need to address. We still have folks that are being pushed out of the areas that they've lived throughout their lifetime, and maybe their family's lifetime before them. And so that goes to making sure that we maintain attainable housing here. And also, attainable housing addresses the fact that you have folks that are making a certain income, and but still, would be a great income anywhere else. But when we're talking about a median home price of $462,000, and that's a median, that still is making housing not affordable. So we would want attainable housing so folks can live here and work in their communities. Affordable housing really goes to folks oftentimes we see it with lower incomes who also work in our area. and we obviously have a lot of folks in the hospitality industry, and not all jobs at hotels and restaurants are going to be high paying jobs. And we want those folks to be able to obviously live here in the area that they live, that they work in. And all of these folks as a whole are also supporting our economy. They're also eating out. They're also going to grocery stores. They're also shopping. They're also doing things to provide for their families. And so this is a great benefit for our community to be able to have more of a diverse group of all income base levels to be able to live and work here in District 110.
So what is your 5-point plan to slow gentrification?
That's tough because that goes back to affordable housing, right? And it keeps housing attainable. What we need to see is these incentives for these construction projects that are being erected around not just the district, but around our area. We've got to allow vouchers or tax incentives, and we've got to work. The state government, the local government, and the private sector have got to be working together. So when we think about what the various points are to make this successful, it is kind of all points on deck here. We have to have a partnership of local and private sector. We have to have partnership of state and private and local government. We have to have incentives put in place. And parts of those points would be tax incentives. It could be vouchers. They would be encouragements, basically, and to get these projects that are coming up to allow for affordable housing. And we need to also have, state laws are not completely out of the realm here. The state can enact laws that can, allow for these certain incentives or tax breaks to be allowed for certain projects. And obviously, I think a very important part of this is going to be local governments and zoning laws. That is where we can zone off areas and protect those homes from certain skyrocketed market place figures to come in and say we're going to cap this area. And so we've seen that on the peninsula and other places as well, and it does help. But the gentrification is a problem. It has been steadily increasing for the last 30 years or more. And that's not right. When we're talking about families who have, a lot of these families didn't leave in the 70s. They didn't leave in the 80s. They stuck around in Charleston. They worked here in Charleston. They provided back to the economic circle and life of Charleston. And so we need to take these things in consideration and understand that we have families who have spent generations here, and we don't want to continue pushing folks out to outer areas when their quality of life is just as important.
And unfortunately, I'm running out of time here, but let me ask you this: when it comes to obviously to education, should a teacher pay increase be an average of 5% over the next 2 years?
Yeah, absolutely. Our teachers, and this is a big issue for me, and one I've been talking about with the voters a lot. We have to make an investment, Quintin, in our public education. Our issues, failures and successes, can be looked back and connected to our support and improvement of public education. If we want to tackle issues like healthcare, if we want to tackle issues like jobs, guns, crime, if we want to tackle issues like poverty, this starts with public education and improving our public education in the state of South Carolina. And right now, that's going to begin with our teachers and increasing our teacher salaries. We're seeing a retention or departure rate of about 6.6% right now, which is unbelievable. You know, our teachers on a average salary and on a median salary, which I think the median figure is more important, is so much lower than the national average. And we have got to increase this in South Carolina. We've got to not only attract teachers, we got to attract folks to move to South Carolina or in South Carolina to become teachers, but we absolutely have to retain the great teachers that we have. And we need to increase their salaries to do that. You know, when we see teachers departing, and I've seen it, I have 4 boys, and they're all going to go to public school. 3 of them are in public school, and one of them would be, but he's too young. I can't wait to get him in there. But, you know, when my oldest started 3rd grade this year, they were all new teachers. And, you know, this is a real shame. I think about in every other profession, you can ask folks, hey, how did you end up doing this job? You know, I remember before I went to law school, I went to a friend of mine whose father was a partner of this big law firm. And I said, how'd you start? How'd you become a lawyer? What made you decide to become a lawyer? And no offense to him, I'm not going to name his name, but he said, well, I graduated from this big university, and a lot of my friends were still in school, and I didn't want to leave. So I decided to go to law school. Yeah, you don't run into this with teachers. Teachers don't fall into teaching. This is a deep-rooted passion. This is something that they believe in. They don't do it for the money. They don't do it for some Wall Street bonus. They don't do it because it's easy, because it's not, right? They do it because they passionately believe in having a positive impact on our children and on our future as a whole. Yet it is becoming financially hard for them to be able to do that. And we're seeing teachers leave because they can't do that. They can't afford simply to teach and live. And that is very unfortunate, and the state has got to address this issue.
And I have less than a minute, well, actually less than 20 seconds. But how many teachers have been lost have actually been lost in the school district, in your district 110?
So on average, let's see, we have 51,000 teachers across the state, I believe. There's a 6.6 departure rate. So, you know, on average, you're looking at 5,000 across the state are leaving. So that breaks down, various numbers for each district.
And unfortunately, I tried to get your opponent, Tom Hartnett, on Quintin's close-ups, but he sent me an email saying, I hate to reach out to do this, but I need to cancel our interview next month. My campaign schedule is taken over, and I'm having to spend as much time as possible going directly to the voters in my district. Well, coming on Quintin's close-ups could do that, but I hope he'll change his mind.
Absolutely. Thank you for this opportunity. I understand the League of Women Voters were going to host a forum, and he dropped out of that as well. And so I don't agree with that. Obviously, this is an opportunity to talk about these important issues with you and with the viewers and the voters of District 110. But thank you for this, Quintin.
Oh, you're welcome. Ellis Roberts, thank you for your time on Quintin's close-ups.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Quintin. It was great seeing you.
Likewise.